morning, good evening, and keep it tight. Welcome back to Liquidmatrix Security Digest podcast. Yes, we're back. The Hacker Radio podcast rides again with episode 0x77. We are the Wu-Tang clan of the podcast world, and that we are the OGs, and we're here to ride again. Yes, I just have to have fun with this. With myself this week is myself, Dave Lewis, and James Arlen on the Wheels of Steel. I should point out that this show does not represent the thoughts, intentions, plans, or strategies for world dominations of our employers, ex-girlfriends, and wives, one and the same for most of us, belly button lint, or the militant wing of the Girl Guides. It is solely our personal opinions. We make no guarantees to the accuracy, validity, sobriety, relevance, or importance of anything we say or do here. My portion of this podcast is brought to you by Bad Choices. Woo, woo, woo. ICQ. Jamie, how are you?
I would go with
We're
a
back.
yeehaw, but it's been like almost 2 years, and that's a
Is
tiny
that
gap
all?
between the shows. Tiny gap. So I've been. There's a lot that fits in 2 years. Summarized, working. That's about it. All in a nutshell. But hey, we're back, and good intentions are paving the road. May or may not go where we want it to go. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised when their podcatcher picks this one up and goes, "Wait, what?"
Well, it's really funny because just last week I was doing a presentation and I had people in the audience ask me questions, not about the topic we were talking about. They literally asked, when is the Liquid Matrix podcast coming back? I was like, it's been 2 years and you're still holding on to this.
Is that
Well, yeah,
because they're
wish come true.
fans or because they're holding a grudge?
You know what? They could, why
That's
not
true.
both?
I suppose.
But it's really amazing to see these things that come back from the past, like people wanting to hear the podcast again, which is really funny because we were talking about starting this up again before that question came up, but it came up a couple other times in completely different venues over the last few days. So it's really amazing to see that there's still an appetite for our, brand of nonsense, which is kind of cool. But, while we're coming back, not everything is coming back. I understand there are some things that are passing off this mortal coil in the near future from the digital
Well,
world.
you see, as part of the news and commentary section of the show, I'm sitting here trying to figure out what's actually important. And as I turned to not actually my laptop, but rather my phone, because I barely use actual full-size computers anymore. And I start thinking, where am I going to go to look for what's going on with news? And it's like, oh, well, I have 19 freaking social networks to look through. So that'll make things easy. And then we're come right around to the news story that ICQ is going to be shutting down very soon. And after IRC, ICQ was kind of the next hangout for me because I thankfully skipped all that AOL, CompuServe, etc. kind of nonsense in favor of jumping directly to the woo-woo sound that had somebody to talk to. And on the one hand, it's like letting go of a piece of your childhood, like, cassette tapes. And on the other hand, it's like, wait, what? It's still around? And I'm trying to figure out how they didn't somehow work into the millennial hipster culture that says, hey, this stuff is better. And then we're all into the what everybody talks about these days, the generational stuff. And I'm like, we're Gen X. We really don't actually miss the 80s because brown, orange, and green are not home decor colors. And the people who lust for some of the ancient technology thing are like, you don't have any idea how good you've got it. I was in a meeting the other day.
To be fair, the color scheme was more for the late 70s.
Yeah, except your parents didn't immediately buy new things in the 80s when they could turn that into neon, magenta, yellow, and teal.
Green. Yeah, we don't talk about those
Yeah, I
things.
was in a meeting the other day and somebody was talking about the need to save something, and I'm like, yeah, just click the icon. And for those of you that listen to the audio only version, Jamie held up a blue Sony diskette of the 3.5-inch variety. you will note it as the thing that you click when you want to save things. And God forsake you ever have to put 1.44 megabytes on anything. I thought there, when I found out that ICQ still existed, like I said, I thought there would be kind of like a hipster resurgence to take advantage of it because it's relatively simple, generally just works. Mm. But instead, like I said, we got this
I,
proliferation. I mean, I got I got an actual notification alert that Blue Sky now allows DMs, and it's like, okay, you added a feature that I've had since the '90s with IRC. Nice, congrats.
yeah.
Um,
That was actually one thing I liked with Slack in the early days is you could actually use an IRC client
yep.
with it.
Oh, we'll talk about Slack in a hot second.
That was actually entertaining.
So like the outcome of it all though is that we don't know how our technologies are being used. Right. This is something I face day to day in my job. I have, because GDPR largely, I don't really know what a lot of the customers actually do with the services that my company sells them. I don't particularly want to know either, for what it's worth. But right back to William Gibson and Neuromancer, the street creates its own uses for things. Like, we can't know how our technologies are going to be used long term. Do any of us really realize that we could be creating something today that's still going to be running 30 years from now? Like, that's substantial. And I don't think that we're planning for it. I don't think that we're allowing for some of the archival work that has to happen. We're accepting of the sort of oligarch owner class of billionaires taking things that were perfectly fine and messing them up for their own purposes. Like, I don't know how we sort of bridge between the ethical obligations that we have around data and information, security, privacy, reliability, etc., and sort of map that into the moral obligations that we have when we create tools and how those tools end up being used by other people. It's entirely possible that
Mhm.
there are people who are going to lose their connectivity to their social group when ICQ shuts down because, for whatever reason, that's where their social group is. The writ small version of it is what we all went through when all of a sudden the conference thing wasn't a thing. And despite the fact that you and I live all of 20 kilometers apart from each other, we generally only see each other at conferences. You know,
It's quite literally true, but to be fair, until I got my complimentary cigarette and blindfold, from my previous employer, I was on the road rather significantly. So that literally was more likely that I would meet you in another country than I would to meet you in the same neighborhood.
but it's also been ongoing for like the better part of a decade too. Yes, remember
Yeah,
that you have to measure your career in decades now, Dave. You've reached that age. And
3 of them.
that was a fun piece of math to do. But we don't consider some of those extraneous obligations that we have wrapped around, or how valuable some of that social interaction stuff can be, because social networks that are used the way they are today as largely broadcast and rage machines is not the same as some of the previous iterations that we had. The way that we moved the hallway track from conference culture into SecTwits, and how that was a collaborative and interactive environment where we brought people up. That there isn't really a place for that now. There's like 6 places for it, and there's a dilution that occurs there. And one of the things that, with your mention of Slack with the IRC interface is, if XMPP had taken off the way that it was supposed to, if Google hadn't shot it in the head, if Cisco hadn't managed to really mess it up, we could have had interoperability that would be functional interoperability. And now we've got the whole war between the green bubble people and the normal blue people. And do you have any green bubble friends? I have a few green bubble friends, and I can't convince them to fix that.
I am so lost on your reference right now that
Usage.
I couldn't get
How do
back
you
with
not
a
know these things, Dave?
what?
Are you not connected to?
I've been sitting on my couch playing Fortnite for a month, so
Yep.
I'm lucky I remember pants. Wait,
Okay, good. You're wearing
yes,
pants.
no, I do
Excellent.
have pants.
Like there's this. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a whiny old man. Have we reached the Pepperidge Farms members part of the show?
Sorry, run that
I
again.
said, maybe I'm just a whiny old man. Have we reached the Pepperidge Farms Remembers segment of the show?
Oh, dude, we reached that 10 years ago.
Well, shit.
Actually, you know what? We should add that as a segment.
Oh,
And you're really nailing on something there when you're talking about, these legacy type of things that we have to deal with technologies that we're deploying, especially when, God, how many different projects have we run, like installed over the years or deployed over the years? And how many times was there no mention of a sunset provision for that particular project? Or, oh yeah, almost every single project was like, oh, how do we do external logging monitoring? Oh, that's some other team's problem. So there was never any sort of calculation as to how much space we needed for logging, how that logging was going to be accomplished. And that's not in any one company. There's so many companies over the
I
years. And then, going back to the sunset provision, that was the one that has always driven me
I was
bonkers.
reminding somebody the other day of the whole OPEX versus CAPEX thing, how you expend money in very large
Mm-hmm.
organizations, and how the desire was always to capitalize the training because, train the trainers. And how the fact that I include a specific training budget in every one of my budget projections and forecasts, I don't want to depend on the person still being around to train the next person. Just I'm gonna assume that I have to train everybody all the time, and that's just normal. So like there's that sort of wear
Yeah.
and tear. The other one that I often really worry about, and your point about all the things that we've installed over the years, I wonder sometimes how many of the things that I've installed are still running. Noting that I got out of the installation game 7 years ago. So in theory, none of it should still be running.
In theory, I know of at least one Perl script that I wrote back in the late 90s that is still utilized today at a certain client that will remain nameless.
Dude, I've seen your code. It's not good.
I
Oh,
never said it was.
I'm
Yes, there's a reason they put me on stage and not on a keyboard these
yeah.
days.
I think they called that promoting you to management, Jamie.
Crawling
So
upwards. Sorry.
that's our fond memories of the way that it used to be. How about you tell us a story about the future?
Well, the future is so bright. I need to wear AI
And
shades. God, I can't believe I actually said that and didn't
you
throw
were
up.
RSA,
So
dude. You were
artificial
at
intelligence
RSA.
everywhere. It was. Remember you made those bingo cards years ago about the RSA bingo cards. We really should have had one for RSA this year. It was absolutely staggering. Every booth had AI
And
something or other.
every square on the bingo card, just AI. And you could spend a day
Yeah.
filling that card because every single booth. And then you go talk to them. And it's like, okay, so is what you're doing basically machine learning the way we've been doing it for the last 20 years? Or could your entire product be replaced with if then else?
Oh my God. See, this is exactly this is exactly the thing that I always go back to. I've even done that in presentations. I said, here's AI for you for 97% of the companies out there, if then else. And there's a lot of times where they say that simply because they want VC funding or something like that, or, hoping that the customers are not going to ask anything more than what's your name. Um, and that's a bit of a tragic occurrence all by itself. But there are aspects to this that are actually really good. And one of them I was a great not lover of for a long time was when ChatGPT first rolled out. It was something that I just got my knickers in a twist because I could see the potential for companies to use this to write all of their blog posts and things like that. And I got apoplectic about it, and I was like, this is going to be awful. So at one point I sat down, I had ChatGPT write 47 different blog posts on different topics, and I wanted to see if there was a tell. And granted, this was version 3.5. And when it went through it would actually have specific things that it would say in every single blog post. So I would copy paste and I would go search on the internet, and sure enough, I found at least 6 different companies that were clearly using ChatGPT to write all of their
Mm-hmm.
content. And you want to be building trust with the customers that you're dealing with, and the wider audience. And how does that doesn't build any trust if you're relying on something to just churn out the sausage and hope
Yeah.
for the best. And unfortunately, that did happen. However, as ChatGPT has matured, I have seen it in a very different light. And very specifically, when I was at DEF CON last year, I was sitting in the speaker operations room, and my friend was going through and he was doing one of the challenges there at
Mm-hmm.
the conference. And he was using ChatGPT in a way I'd never even considered. So he was getting to do hashes, all the rest of it, just trying all these really
Mm-hmm.
interesting things, so that I've now started using in that vein. But the other side of that is there's a lot of bug hunters that are now using it to try and find bugs and then get paid out on these bugs. The downside there is there's a lot of erroneous reports that are now being filed because ChatGPT, quote unquote, found a bug, but it turns out that it was just complete
Like,
nonsense. Flip that on its head, we're
I was
seeing.
going to say, you mean like
Sorry?
ChatGPT for bug bounty researchers is the new Nessus for bug bounty researchers? Because our
Oh, I
discard
remember.
rate off the top with those things, like, I am so glad that we use a bounty provider that does good triage, because the reject rate of you ran a scanner and submitted the entire PDF of results, you're banned.
And I remember way back when there was a group that we'll refer to as the B team submitted a report to me at one company I was working at. Oh, you know what
Um,
I'm talking about. And it was like saying, "Oh, your HPUC server was vulnerable to this, and that," or sorry, your Windows server was vulnerable to this, and this, but it was actually an HPUC box, and it was a very well-known, well-documented issue with Nessus. And that's not to beat up on Nessus. That was just a known thing at the time, and just unfortunately, there was no sanity checking on that particular report before it was
mhm.
handed over. Ah, the days. But yeah, so this is one of those things that we're seeing now, where you're having that deluge of reports that are coming in that, well, they used to happen before. Like, remember the good old Tracer T kid, if you remember that one. Um, or that other kid that was going after and trying to hack somebody and then said, "Oh, here's my IP address 127.0.0.1." And it's like, "Ha, I got you now." Yeah, okay, good luck with that.
And you,
Um, and when we talk to folks like Casey Ellis in the industry, and it's like he has built out a wonderful program around what he's doing at his operation, but again, he's one of many that has to deal with this generation of gobbledygook that people don't have the wherewithal to understand. So that's the AI future. Yes, there is possibilities, there is an upside, but there's so much garbage that we have to wheedle our way through.
yeah, I think
Um,
one of the things
much like the
that's
show floor
that's
this
sort of
year.
key in it is there's the, do you overpromise and underdeliver, which is like the standard. And we can all tell stories of companies that have yet to deliver the product they promised us. You
Single pane of glass.
Yeah, specifically Symantec. You and I can tell stories of, oh, I don't know, Mars. Like, there's a lot of, yeah, I know,
Oh,
remember. um this is a 20-year-old memory, by the way. It's like practically a core memory at this point. There's all these companies that
oh
do that, and
dear.
then you run into the reverse situation, which is, the company that I work for, we just released a feature that is labeled as AI. It's actually more ML than it is Gen AI for sure, because it's not, our API key into OpenAI is how it works. It's very much actual stuff that we run, and every question that I've got about it on LinkedIn or direct messages from people is, no, really, how does it work? And it's like, it's actual machine learning and optimization of pathways. And they're like, okay, but no, really, it's just OpenAI underneath, right? And it's like, no, it's not, because that's not something that would be helpful in this situation. Wait, so it's real? It's
Yeah.
like, yes, it's real. Today alone, I've answered the question, yes, it's real, probably a dozen times. And That's what I mean about how the hype cycle is sort of, it's taken it beyond rational into somewhere else. And I don't know how to pull back from that as an industry, because we're right back into the same shit that you and I have been talking about for 20 years. The industry is perpetuating an emergency because it serves the need
Yeah.
of the industry existing instead of solving the actual.
Well, remember when cloud became a
Yeah.
term? It's the same thing all over again. Everything is, the cloud this, cloud that. Remember there was one vendor on the RSA show floor that year. I don't even remember what year that was. And they're like, "Oh yeah, we're cloud such and such." And meanwhile, it was an appliance. And after talking to them for about, 10, 15 minutes, they finally admitted like, "No, we don't have anything to do with the cloud
Yep.
whatsoever." And it's just like, "Oh, seriously?
It's
Really?"
seriously real.
Frustration.
So
Yeah.
traditionally, we have a section here called breaches. And looking at
Yes.
the list, I think the only correct answer is your mom, because it's like everybody and it's constant.
It's not. There's a blog post I have on Liquidmatrix from 2012 where I was tracking data breaches because I was bored out of my mind and I have very interesting hobbies. And at the time, there was one particular data breach which was LinkedIn, not to beat up on them, but there was at the time that was the biggest one. That was 6.9
Yeah.
million records. Nowadays, that wouldn't even get a
Uh-uh.
hiccup. We're talking orders of magnitude of billions of records. We're seeing, hotel chains with their point of sale systems compromised, and aquariums where people are using that to breach into a network, or light bulbs there you can use to pivot onto a wireless network. It never
Mhm.
ending. And it's like, how did we get worse?
Well, all right.
Like, we've been doing this for so
So
long.
let's pick on one that's near and dear to my heart, because it's in the city that I live in. For those of you who don't know, Dave lives like one city over. His is the cooler city.
We're in the trenches.
Whatever. Um, my city's like 5 times the size of his, so it's definitely cooler because there's more of us. But the breach that the city is going through and has been going through since like February has included brilliant outcomes from the city manager, who went on the record saying that the city has world-class security talent working to ensure the security of the city. And it's like, well, as much as I'm gonna, sprain my shoulder as I pat myself on the back, um, both me and one of my security analysis and response team managers live in this city, and neither one of us are working on the problem. And we work for a global company doing security shit. So who do we know that's working on the problem at the city? And the answer is, I cannot find a connection. Level 1, level 2, level 3. I cannot find a connection to the company that they are saying is doing their breach response.
Yeah, I know the company that they say is doing their breach response. I am actually gobsmacked of what I've seen so far, mainly because I know a couple of city workers that live nearby to where I am, and I've had conversations with them. And they said to this day they are still not getting paid
Correct.
regularly. They are getting lump sum payments that are checks that are cut by the city. And I'm like, this, what year is this? This is absolutely staggering.
My best
So
bet
yeah, to Tub Thump saying that.
my
Sorry, go
best
ahead.
bet is, it's been legitimately 3 months since they took systems
Yes.
offline. And my guess is that they don't understand the fundamentals of containment. They think they've got it contained, but you and I remember all too well how you can hide Nmap in a printer in the 90s. Well, I mean, actually the early 2000s, because it didn't exist in the
Oh,
90s,
that
but
was fun.
being able to persist on the network. And this is a conversation
Yep.
that I keep having. Not that I'm picking on GTM, but it tends to be GTM, go to market, sales. No, you can't buy your
Yeah.
own IT accessories. The IT department buys your IT accessories. Why? Well, because even a keyboard is a substantial computer these days. And you can put a lot of stuff into keyboard firmware for your fancy custom mechanical keyboard thing that you can reprogram all the keys and everything. If you can reprogram it, it's a full computer, and therefore you can hide shit in it.
Yep.
You have one of those on your desk right now, don't you? Yep. There you go. And it comes to the fundamentals, which is behind the whole topic of breaches, which is doing it well requires that you approach everything with an intent to do it well. And that's getting to be shockingly rare.
It is, and it's kind of absurd because this is nothing new. But one thing that I'm really struck by is when last time I was at B-Sides Toronto a couple of years ago, I asked the audience, I said, how many people have been in the industry for, 2 years? And all the arms shot up. And I was like, how many have been in for 10 years? And a few arms shot up. Like 20 years, like two or three of us. And I realized that, the vast majority of these people are very new to this industry. And, I'm not even going to go into the whole realm of burnout and things like that, but it is relatively an immature space. And as a result, we're not capturing the lessons learned that we've done over and over and over again in a really articulate way. I mean, I know there's been efforts like Jack Daniel tried to do a project to capture all the lessons learned and things like that, but he's only one man, and like as wonderful as he is, there's only one of them. But that's the kind of thing is like we need to do a much better job of catching this stuff and saving it in perpetuity because this is going to keep happening. Like if you look at jurisprudence, you look at the medical profession, they have, canon, they have all the rest of it where they have captured all of this. And they try to avoid the lather, rinse, repeat of, oh, I got my finger cut in the door. Oh, I got my finger cut
All
in the
right.
door.
So I know that
Or the
I know
electrified
that
cupcake.
you're not the kind of person who attends open source meetups, especially local ones.
Not anymore.
But last week there was the open source data infrastructure meetup in Toronto, and I gave a talk about my view of security and compliance in 2024 and beyond. And it was recorded at some point; it'll pop up on the internet. And I pulled
Cool.
a talk that I gave in Calgary in like 2008, counted the days, um, using today as the destination date, 5,741 days ago. And I re-gave those 6 or 7 slides as talk. Apart from the dates on the slides and the fact that I kind of had to blank out who my employer was at the time, literally zero changes to the slides. 5,000-day-old talk. And I didn't have to make material changes to it in order to deliver it as a state of the industry, state of what's happening. Here's what you have to pay attention to. And then I could wrap up, because it was only like a half an hour talk, I could wrap up with a tie the bow on it and say, everything old is new again.
I'm laughing here because a couple of years ago I wrote a blog post, and because I always hate the predictions for next year nonsense. So what I did was I did a top 10 vulnerabilities for the coming year. So everybody's like, oh wow, but only 9 of these are current. And I said, yes, it was a copy and paste from a blog post that I found 10 years earlier. 9 of them were still valid. I got nothing. I got nothing. It just
Yeah.
hurts my brain.
You want to hear other things that hurt your brain?
Oh, I'd
Okay,
love to hear
so
that. Flaming Q-tips.
everybody understands the boot mounted holster, right? Where you put the holster right on the top of the boot so that when you accidentally pull the trigger, you definitely shoot your own foot. Have you met Slack lately?
It's a feature. Oh dear, what did you do?
So nominally Salesforce is pretty good about AI and ethics. Like I worked there during sort of the first version of AI at Salesforce. Slack decided somewhere along the line that they were just going to go ahead and inhale all of your stuff into their learning models. And in my day job, in addition to being the CISO, I'm also the CIO. And so I kind of own the Slack enterprise grid contract. And it's like, wait a minute, you did what now? I'm sorry. And they provided an opt out feature, which does not opt you out of being in their AI universe. What it opts you out of is your data going into the general model. It still goes into a model for your organization, for your enterprise grid. But wait, it gets worse. If you want to use any of the AI features, that's an extra additional cost on top of your enterprise grid. So I'm not interested in paying for those features at this point, not my budget. So I'm not paying for the features, but you're still adding to a model that I have no intention of using. And let's face it, I spend way more time looking at Slack than I do at email. I check my email once a day because everything else is in Slack. And wait a minute,
Yeah.
everything else is in Slack. Dude, everything else is in Slack. And now it's in a model that I don't actually have control over. They say they're not using it as part of their general model, but there's no point of proof. And it's in support of a feature that I have no interest in buying. Which goes right back to what we were talking about with the whole RSA, everything's got AI in it. Can I get the non-AI version of your product? I mean, dude, did you see the iTerm 2 thing? All right, so iTerm 2 is an alternate terminal app for macOS. If you don't like terminal.app, you use iTerm2.app, and it does have some cool features. They added a new feature where you plug in your OpenAI API credentials, and it will help you do auto completion on anything in the terminal.
Oh dear.
And it's like, all right, so I'm a huge fan of bash history because I can never remember what the hell I did on that machine the last time I SSH'd into it.
I'm glad I'm not the only
So
one.
turns out, Control R is a good way to figure out what the hell I'm doing. I don't sysadmin very often anymore, but also they're sending everything that you put on the command line to OpenAI. 99
So
times out of
funny.
100, it's something completely innocuous and it doesn't really matter. But one time in 100, that's what we affectionately refer to at work as a leaky lobster. And you've just tossed a username password combo into OpenAI. Well, OpenAI does not have the equivalent of GitHub Secrets Manager, so and Secret Scanner, sorry, GitHub Secret Scanner. And so I don't know that I'm going to get an alert that you've popped an AWS API key into, so frustrating as heck, but I do want to send out huge props to the support person at Slack who took my opt-out request and broad assumptions. They were absolutely fantastic and professional in their communications. So while the company may have made Imho a stupid choice, the follow through was clean. I put in the request. Less than an hour later, I get the response from the support team. The support team asks a couple of follow up questions. I respond, and it's done with a smile.
Yeah, I had the same
Like,
experience.
it was
Great.
absolutely fantastic. So, on the one hand, you dumb schmucks. And on the other hand, hey, nicely done. Appreciate it.
But one thing I'm really curious about, if they're hoovering up all this information, I wonder how many times they have people trying to quit VI.
The answer is I have no idea how to do that. If you're a real person, you use Nano or Pico. Just saying.
I am a simulant.
That's the DERPs.
Oh, fun and games.
We went through the mailbag, all 2 years of it, and
Amazing how much malware you can
about
collect.
the same as the number of SDR phone calls I get in a day. And we've got this one from a concerned patron. So y'all gonna actually keep this up for real this time?
For really real.
We're gonna try.
Totes my loads. Yeah, definitely gonna try.
The
We got all the gear. We got everything we need to pull it off. It's just a matter of So it may to be fair, it may be a rotating cast of characters because we have the original cast. It's just as you can see, there's only 2 of us this time, but it's meetings happen. That
Yeah, I
is a
mean,
thing.
somebody said we had to do this during the day, and I'm not allowed to day drink, so this is the sober version of all of us. But yeah, not that we're holding you responsible, person. Uh, yeah.
Hmm.
So, answer
Fun and
to our
games.
concerned patron: like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.
Ding,
Oh,
ding,
and
ding,
also,
ding.
not an act,
Here we go. 10
not an
million
actual
subscribers.
sponsor, but AG1 tastes like ass, but it works.
I have so many questions, none of which I want answers to.
And somebody gets my jokes.
Oh,
Finally.
yes,
All
totally.
right.
Oh,
Briefly.
so briefly,
Yeah.
well, briefly, I am no longer going to be able to sit on the couch playing Fortnite all day as I wait for the time to pass. I am starting a new job. By the time this goes to air or is pushed out, rather, I will actually be working a new job, and I will be global advisory CISO for 1Password. And I'm very excited about this. It's going to be an awesome experience. However, and this is nothing to do with 1Password, they've been absolutely fantastic. But during my interview process, I interviewed with about 15 companies altogether, and at the end there was 10 that were active. Um, 3 that actually tried to outbid the one that I went with, which was really kind of humbling to see that happen. But one in particular ghosted
Yep.
me, and I've been talking to a lot of people in the industry that are looking for jobs as well. It's actually anytime people tell me that there's a shortage of security talent, I tell them to go pound sand because I know too many good people out on the street that are looking for a
Yep.
gig right now. Um, and it's absolutely frustrating to see that. But ghosting somebody after they've taken the time to put themselves out there, trying to get a job, to provide for themselves, their families, all the rest of it, even a courtesy little scripted email would be better than
Yes.
nothing. And you know what? I want to say which company that is, but I'm not going to because it's a small world. But we see you, and that's just not a way to treat people. And I also had one company that actually filtered me out within 10 minutes, and it turned out it was an AI script. So my resume went in, didn't have the proper keyword apparently, and got bounced. And the people internally the organization were flaming pissed because they had asked me to apply. Um, and it's just one of those insane little moments. But that part, yeah, I get that. That's going to happen, and we're going to see more of that before we see less of it. But ghosting people is inexcusable in this day and age. To especially people that have done 30 years in the trenches, and that we've earned our
Yep.
stripes. We've earned that courtesy, form email. Um, but I get it. Some of these jobs get 30,000 people applying for that gig.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can automate the response. It sucks, but it's
Well,
better
and
than nothing.
and any good candidate management system is going to work that way. It just means that they're not
Yeah.
configuring it well. They're not using it properly, which is hilarious. Um,
Yeah, props to there's one called Greenhouse that actually
that's what
does
we
a really good
use.
job. I did have experience with that in the past where it actually handled
Yeah,
it
that's
very
what we
well.
use for essentially that purpose. But fair warning, you do know that some of your new customers, one in particular, is a real jackass and is going to be all up in your shit.
Some things never
Yeah.
change, Jamie.
Um, yeah. It's only sort of vaguely a me too. I got a new job too with the same company, but
Woohoo.
with massively expanded responsibilities. And it was a conversation that I was having. We had a staff member leave, a very regrettable departure, but for all the right reasons. And I wish them the best going forward because I'd hire them again in a freaking instant. But the conversation we had was about there's a clock on these things. We're a bunch of mercenaries. We work as long as the check cashes,
Mm.
and there's a clock. And for most people, it's
Yep.
somewhere in the 3 to 5 years range. Doesn't really get much longer than that. Like if I go back and look at my career, the longest I've ever worked anywhere is 5.5 years. That's it. In 30 years, the longest I've ever worked for one company in a row, because I boomeranged a couple of times, But the longest I've ever worked for one company in a row is like 5.5 years. And so it's a thing. You can expect, if you're in the industry but on the newer end of the spectrum, you can expect that you're going to change jobs. Like, plan for it. And for all of those, talent acquisition people, focus on the fact that people are going to be changing jobs every 3 years. That's how you hunt the next good one. Know what I mean?
Yep. And so, wait, you're the CISO and the
I've
CIO.
been that for a long time. I'm also now responsible for all of our production infrastructure as well.
Okay, so you realize jobs are not Pokemons. You don't have to collect them all.
Are you sure?
No, I'm not actually. I
Yeah.
think that's kind of cool.
I mean, from a practical perspective, like bringing together release engineering and SRE reliability kind of engineering, along with security and IT into a unified whole, so that we're the ones who provide the infrastructure for everyone to get things done with the platform, not just our internal users, but external users as well, customers. Like it's a comfy fit to be able to start knitting those things together into a unified whole. If anybody wants to talk about that stuff, hi, I'm Jamie.
Cool.
Speaking of, where do we get to see you next?
I will be actually at Gartner, DC, and I'll be there. Then after that, I have no idea because I literally have no idea what my schedule is going to look like. I will most likely be in Vegas in the summer, so I will definitely be there in some
I'm
capacity.
bouncing back and forth on whether that's going to be a thing or I'm just going to take vacation instead. Um,
That
as
works out.
noted, you just missed me at the Open Source Data Infrastructure Toronto meetup. I'm trying to avoid doing anything meaningful, so maybe you'll see me and maybe you won't. I mean, I'll be at Sector, so come visit Canada in the fall. It's very pretty.
Truth.
Indeed.
Bring a warm jacket though. And should we do an InfoSec
I
Seacrest?
really think we should.
I have one. I have one.
I worked hard on writing the one that's in the actual script, though. Like, I put
Oh, you know what? Let's go with
effort
the script.
into it. Again, wink, wink,
Why?
nudge, nudge. You know who you are and why I have to do this. Seacrest says, be vulnerable. It's good for you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in this week. This has been a lot of fun. I'm really glad that we're doing this again, and it's a chance where I actually get to see you.
Indeed. Maybe we could even like be in the same room and record one of these.
I do have space in
It's
this room.
small.
Yes, that is
I
a
have like my
possibility.
whole office cabin building too.
I'm sure we can figure something out.
Cool, Dave.
All right, then. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. This has been awesome. You have been listening to the Liquidmatrix Security Digest podcast, the Hacker Radio podcast. We are really jazzed to be back. And yes, we will be doing this again very soon. Catch you later. Cheers.